Welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is Aidan Trewin, author of the new crime novel, Seven Demons. Trewin is also the author of the previous novel, The Price You Pay. And now we can reveal that Aidan Trewin is a pseudonym for the author Nick Harkaway. Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Well, if someone hasn't yet heard about your new novel, Seven Demons yet, how would you describe the novel?
The Jack Price stories are a kind of wild ride crime story where I sort of worry less and just do more. And so the Seven Demons is a heist story. It's set in Switzerland. The characters are robbing the most secure bank in the world. And as you would imagine, because it's a kind of story of mayhem, everything goes wrong.
Well, do you remember the original idea or impetus that led you to writing Seven Demons?
Well, my problem was the same as Jack Price's problem at the beginning of the book. He's got on hand a bunch of highly talented international crooks and nothing to do with them. And I had the same thing, right? I'm sitting down with the book. This is kind of picking up from where we left off with the first one. And I've got this skilled team of terrifying lunatics, and they have nothing to do. They have no enemies left. And so what do? Actually, if you're going to reestablish, it's kind of a management problem. You've got to reestablish the brand. So what are they going to do? They're going to take a contract and they're going to execute it perfectly. And everyone's going to go, wow, those guys are really good. And they're going to do that all with the minimum of fuss, because the last thing that's happened has just been this huge explosion of fire and publicity and so on. And this is going to be, they're going to demonstrate how professional they are. Everything's going to settle down back into a kind of normal, even, steady flow of the world. Everybody else gets on with their lives. They get on with committing international crimes and everyone's happy, right? I mean, what could possibly go wrong? And of course, as I say, the answer is pretty much everything. So, yeah, I mean, I just sat down and was like, okay, well, if you were trying to reassure people that you were still the best kind of criminal syndicate for hire in the world, what kind of thing would you do? Like, well, you rob a bank because it's a classic and you've got to respect your classics.
That's great. Well, I'm curious, why did you decide to write The Price You Pay under a pen name? Did the writing feel differently versus a Nick Harkaway novel?
It did. That wasn't. I mean, so there was a practical reason. Let me give you the sequence of events. So I'd just written a book called Nomon, which was a great big philosophical, speculative, literary novel about banking and alchemy and surveillance and identity. I mean, it's this huge thing with 7 kind of central characters revolving around one another, and they're all unreliable narrators. And the whole thing took me years. And I put the final, and I wanted it to be a warning, right? Because it was 2016. I started writing in 2014. It's 2016. And I realized that, I had come to the conclusion that there was a dangerous thread of kind of angry neo-fascism floating around in the world. And I wanted to warn everybody about that. I finished the book. The UK immediately voted for Brexit, and things got worse from there. And I was just going nuts. I just couldn't believe it. I was like, when I started writing this book, it was supposed to be a warning. I took too long over it. And obviously, if I'd just written it faster and it had been published, none of these terrible things would have happened. Everything that's gone wrong with the world is all my fault. And real kind of that weird combination of hubris and narcissism and guilt that writers subject themselves to. And so I was just in a hole of horror. And I sat down at my computer one morning and I just started writing. And I didn't get up from the computer until kind of 9:30 at night. And I had however many thousand words of The Price You Pay. This story about a guy who's doing a perfectly ordinary, sensible, white-collar cocaine business. And then he finds out that for just no reason at all, the 7 worst people in the world have been hired to come and kill him. And his reaction to this is the best day of my life. Because now that that's happened, he doesn't have to be this kind of well-behaved, under-the-radar guy anymore. The rules of engagement have changed. The rules of his life, the rules we all live by, that they're tacit, they're internalized. That you're kind of, when you queue up and get coffee, if someone steps on your toe, you're not immediately going to put them through a plate glass window, right? Because no one does that. In the movies, people do that. But I mean, so But the majority of people do not respond that way. They don't escalate that much. But in this guy's situation, suddenly that is the only legitimate way to behave. He has to escalate massively and ridiculously in order to stand a chance. And so he's just like, this is the best thing ever. And so I had a great deal of fun writing this book, and it was therapy, right? I mean, it was just way cheaper than, any of the other ways you might make yourself feel better about the fact that the way you understand the world turns out to be completely wrong. And so, and that was great. And I had a terrific time. And then I got to the end and I said to my agent, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I've written this book, and there's a character in Nomon called Diana Hunter, who is a novelist, and she writes these weird kind of pulpy yet somehow also philosophical thrillers, and they're kind of weird. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the title of one of those on this book. I'm going to call it Mr. Murder Investigates. I'm going to publish it as Diana Hunter. I'm just going to put it out on the internet. And, and everyone can have it free. And then when they read Nomon, they're going to go, oh, wow, there really is a Diana Hunter. How weird is that? Because Nomon is a reality jamming thing. So first of all, I was convinced that everyone would Google the names of all the characters in Nomon, right? Which is nonsense. But anyway, and my agent was just like, Nick, just stop. You've written a novel. It's great. Let's try, and I know this is revolutionary, let's try taking it to a publisher and see whether your publisher wants to publish this as another book. And, it turned out that Knopf absolutely were game for that. My UK publisher wasn't sure. They had a problem, so we actually ended up going somewhere else. But what nobody wanted was for me to have Nomon and the Price You Pay out as Nick Harkaway books pretty much simultaneously. So what we did was I said, okay, and I anagrammatized Diana Hunter's name, and you get Aidan Truen.
That's great.
So I mean, and then that now nobody can remember who it was who insisted on doing that. My editor here in the UK at the time, I think it was him. Edward Kastenmeier says it was definitely me, I think. And just round and round we go. And, everybody's convinced it was someone else. And so then now I'm just like, okay, it's me. Let's all have some fun now. It's just, we can all talk about this. And it's kind of more fun to be talking about pseudonyms and dual identities and so on than it is to be kind of creeping around. Because the other thing is it's really difficult doing book events, trying to conceal your identity, right? So I did some book events as Aidan Truen, and I was wearing a full face mask, like one of those ones you would wear for a green screen, so over my eyes and everything. And I am here to tell you that is a terrible way to try to read from a book in the normal lighting of a bookshop. It is a terrible, terrible thing. It was just a disaster zone, but it was great fun. I had all these funny voices I did for Aidan, and and I had disguises, and obviously it was a big game, and everybody knew it was a game, and that was part of the fun. But it was actually a massive outlay of energy as well. And it's just an enormous relief, to kind of just say, hey, it's me. And yes, I did this crazy thing.
So I'm curious, are you working on another Nick Harkaway novel that looks beyond Brexit and the storming of the U.S. Capitol?
I have actually just sold a new novel. So we'll kind of, we'll get into that when kind of it's literally just, we haven't even inked it yet.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so there is one. And I have another one in my back pocket, which I was writing. I feel in my kind of Nick Harkaway hat, I tend to deal with kind of big themes and concepts and so on. And I feel, I can't do dystopian stuff anymore. I just feel like the world is genuinely too much in that place. Maybe dystopia is actually too mild a word for where we are. And so, I was writing. I wrote a book which I still have to kind of finish editing, which is about finding the green shoots of a good tomorrow in the rubble of today. Just as the horrible consequences that we are living through of various things that were present embryonically or in seed, kind of 2-3 decades ago, and then they grew up through the cracks in what we thought was a solid foundation. So the good stuff must be waiting there. And if we find it, locate it, preserve it, nurture it, we might get a good future out of the world yet, out of ourselves. So that book is partly about that. And I need to get back to it. But I have this year, I just have an insane amount on my plate. I'm loving every second of it, but I have a lot to do. So that particular book is somewhere down around priority number 4.
That's great. Well, we'll look for that. So Your novel is being published by the Vintage Crime Black Lizard Publishing imprint.
Yes,
I was wondering if you're familiar with the history of Black Lizard and Vintage Crime.
I am, and I'm a little bit obsessed with them. Actually, first of all, we're kind of going backwards. I got no, I think they sent it to me. Knopf sent me, or my editor Knopf sent me the one of the Black Lizard sort of compendium volumes, the Book of Villains, which is a collection of shorts and so on about villains, and I absolutely loved it. And I love all those kind of pulpy short stories and so on. And I'm slightly obsessed with Walter B. Gibson, who wrote a bunch of those stories, because I'm just the output is so phenomenal, right? These guys were writing 1 to 2 million words a year. And there's a sort of, you probably know this story, and you can tell me whether it's true or not. There's a story that Walter B. Gibson and Raymond Chandler had a kind of dialogue going on. And Chandler, in his sort of pulpier phase, was complaining to Gibson, I don't make any money. How do you guys make money like this? I'm not making any money. And Gibson's like, well, I can tell you what you're doing wrong right now. You're editing these stories. I can read your stories, and you're kind of, you're getting paid by the word, but you're spending, days and days and days on making every single sentence right. That's not this gig. That's a different gig. And you've got to go out there and not edit the stories and just get paid by the word. And hey, if you figure it, wow. If Walter B. Gibson was getting paid by the word, he wrote a lot of words every year. He was doing okay. But Chandler, I think in the end, as far as I know, he kind of couldn't bring himself to do that. So he ended up going off and writing screenplays instead as a steady source of income.
So I'm curious, what was your writing journey that led you to writing and getting your first novel published?
Oh, wow. I come from a writing family, right? So my dad was John le Carre. He died in December last year. And so I always knew that writing was a thing you could do. Like, I saw what it looked like to do it and to have completed a book. And the first thing that I said to myself was, okay, well, I'm not going to do that. And so I went, when I went to university, I did a politics degree, and I had my eye on, when I was in my kind of third year at university, I had my eye on either doing kind of global security with a focus on Eastern Europe or on environmental law. And that was where I was headed. And then I got to the end of my university degree, and I cannot sit in a classroom for another 2 years. I can't do it. So I went and got a job in the movie industry. I was a runner on a bunch of movies, kind of, 16-hour, 18-hour days, running around making coffee for everybody and just screwing up egregiously. And I have no idea why they didn't fire me, except that I think that's what runners do. I think they're there to screw up egregiously. So I did that. And then at some time I started writing film scripts, because I thought, well, okay, I do want to tell stories, but if I write film scripts, then I don't have to compare myself with my dad, because that's kind of futile. So, maybe if I write film scripts, that would be different. And I did that for a while. And for the better part of a decade, I was an unproduced screenwriter in London. And then in 2005, I was getting married. And I was like, I cannot be this stereotype guy sitting in an attic in northwest London writing screenplays and getting paid but not getting produced. That is just too terrifying. I can't live through that. And my wife has an actual job, At the time, she was an intellectual property lawyer. She's now a CEO in the charitable sector. She's kind of enormously brilliant. And I was like, okay, well, that's just, I can't make her look bad. So I'm going to write a book. And if I write a book and that works, then that's great. If I write a book and it doesn't work, then I'll go back to school and I'll do those 2 years of sitting in the classroom, and I'll do one of those two things that I talked about. And so, however you want to spin it, either to the good fortune or the ill fortune of the world, the book worked. That was The Gone Away World. And people liked it. And, and so then here I am. It's just been a kind of, broadly speaking, a straight line from there.
That's great. I'm curious, and I'm sure that you've been asked this before. I'm curious about writing in the shadow of your father. And as you may be aware, two of Stephen King's sons or I'd say both of his sons are writers. So, it's not unheard of. I'm just curious, do you just kind of put that out of your mind when you're sitting down at the keyboard?
It doesn't even really come into my mind. It's not. I definitely haven't got my father's ghost sitting on my elbow, kind of going, "Oh,
Hmm.
I don't think I like that." Actually, that would be great. I would love that if I just if I could sit down. I'm going to put a chair on my left the next time I sit down and see whether I can get that to happen. No, actually, it's weirdly, it's easier than that, and it's more difficult than that. It's easier than that because so much. I think so many of the barriers that people find to writing are about process and about kind of they feel there's so much mythology around writing, like it should flow from you naturally. It's your own inner voice. It's not like work. It's like floating. Um, you know, all of these things are untrue. And then just kind of I have watched one of the kind of one of the most renowned writers in the world struggle with a manuscript. I've seen him hate what he's writing. I've seen
Right.
him tear things up and throw them away. I've seen him come down, go for a grumpy walk with the dog. I have seen him sit there and say to me, but really essentially to himself, you turn up every day, you write, you get to the end, and then you edit, and then you see what you've got. It's a stamina game. It's always a stamina game. It's not, it isn't something that you just kind of float through and come out the other end and you're wearing kind of hat with a flower on it. It's a grind. And when you know that, but you know that if you show up, you will finish, that's a huge advantage. It's just, having seen that process and so on. So I have that. We never really talked directly about technique very much, or
Hmm.
about, there weren't kind of great sort of recordable symposiums. If you'd had a microphone in our house, I don't think you would really ever have had us talking for more than about 4 minutes about about how we wrote, or how I write, how he wrote, and so on.
Sure.
No, I mean it's just but by the same token, I grew up in a house that was full of stories. Stories were the currency that we had. I have three older half brothers. They would show up and what have you been doing? Well, this funny thing happened. Everything. If I came back from school, my dad came back from a walk. He got an acorn dropped on his head by a squirrel. For him, that's already a 10-minute story. It's going to make you laugh more than you can imagine. So. So everything I knew was narrative, and there's any number of ways in the universe that you can learn to deploy that, and find an outlet for it. But in the end, I ended up on the most direct one.
Sure. Well, you talked about process just then, and I'm curious, what is your process? I mean, when you are working on a novel, are you writing kind of just kind of diving into the narrative? I mean, you talked about this initial writing session when you started writing The Price You Pay, or are you doing a lot of plotting beforehand?
I do both.
Hmm.
So I mean, let's see. I mean, with Nomon specifically, which is a long time ago now for me, but it's still my most recent Nick Harkaway novel. With that, I had an idea of how it would work. I knew what the nature of the story was and how it ultimately came out. Um, I knew what I wanted it to be, but I didn't have a detailed plan, and that either cost me or was the making of it. I dived in and I thought I was going to be writing a short book. I really thought I was writing a kind of Kurt Vonnegut, kind of thing. And within 3 months, I was up to my eyeballs in appallingly complex interactions between narrative storylines and so on. Now, could I have plotted that out? I'm not sure. I don't know if I could ever have done that interweaving without writing the book. But I learned a bunch of stuff about how to approach that. So from writing a book that was almost completely non-linear and having to learn to write from the back to the front, and
Hmm.
having to interweave and carry so much stuff in your head, and then discovering that you can't carry that many interactions in your head all the time. Until Nomon, I carried every single book, the whole of it, in my head all the time. After that, I realized you don't have to do that, and indeed, in many cases, you can't do that. You have your plan, you have your skeleton, you focus on given interactions, and then you knit it together. All kinds of things changed for me writing that book because I really pushed the envelope on what I was capable of doing. And so, I mean, so my process is really kind of actually quite ordinary. I always feel guilty answering this question. So, in a kind of ordinary day-to-day sense, I come upstairs to my office. I have an office at the top of the house. After I've taken the kids to school, I sit down, I start writing. I go, at lunchtime, I go down, eat some food. I come back and do another couple of hours, come up, sign off, and then go and get the kids, bring them back, do homework, do dinner, kind of fall over on my face. And now we have a dog, so I fit the dog into that too. And sometimes that means standing in front of a whiteboard, drawing spider diagrams and lines in the air. Sometimes it means talking to myself in a loud voice and yelling at the corner. Sometimes it means sitting down in front of the computer and writing a scene that's way out of order, way from in the middle, from the end, or it means kind of just sitting down and writing something that might feel like it's from a different book, except somehow it's from this one. And what am I doing here? It's very much a question of following where the story leads, where your instinct is taking you. And sometimes your instinct takes you in the wrong direction and you kind of go, no, that's a completely other concern that you have. You want to talk about that, we'll do that in another book. So you've got to turn it around, turn that off. But actually when you cauterize one of those wrong avenues, very often a whole bunch of things fall into place in the rest of the story. And you're kind of like, well, I need to take that out as well. I need to take that out as well. But then, suddenly, look, now I have a linear kind of narrative again.
Right.
So I went from Nomon to the first Jack Price, which is a completely linear narrative. I mean, it's literally this guy, kind of gets the news that he's being hunted, and then he decides to hunt everybody back, and then you have a sequence of events, and he survives, and that's it. Bang. There's really no there's an increase in tension. There's whatever, but there's no flashback. There's no kind of side avenues really. There's just what there is. And then with Seven Demons, it's a little more convoluted. There's layers above and below because you've got 7 characters, which you've got to deal with. They all, and each of the demons has moods, needs, concerns, whatever. So you've got more going on, but the process remains the same. I plan sometimes, I don't plan other times.
Gotcha. I'm curious, given your writing success to date, what writing advice would you offer for those who are working on their own stories or novels?
I mean, there's a whole raft of pieces of advice you can give people for different specific situations. I mean,
at Kings Island, it's never too early to start thinking about next year's fun. That's why we're offering the lowest price of the year on a 2022 Gold Pass right now. That includes unlimited visits this year, so you can enjoy Tricks and Treats Fall Fest, Haunt, and Winterfest. Then unlimited visits next year to try new foods, hang with the Peanuts gang at Planet Snoopy, scream on our world-class coasters, and splash away at Soak City Water Park. All for as low as $105 plus applicable taxes and fees. Hurry! Offer ends soon, so get your Gold Pass now at visitkingsisland.com. It's amazing in here.
Sure. The first one is show up. The weird thing is if you show up and you write, day by day, you end up with a novel. I did NaNoWriMo last year and I loved it. That was great because then you show up, you've got to come up with 55,000 words. And there's a consequence of that, right? As soon as you know that you've got to write a large amount of stuff in a short period of time, you get into Walter B. Gibson mode. And there's several things that happen there. And the first and most important is that you pick the kind of story you're going to tell. Because you cannot tell a convoluted roller coaster, switchback, sidewinder, twisty story, corkscrew story in that period of time at that speed. You won't do it. You can have deceptions and reveals, but you've got to have a linear story. You've got to have something like the unity of time and place, one character doing one thing in the course of one, in the pursuit of one goal. If you've got something like that, it doesn't matter. It can be a very long time period. You can tell it over a lifetime or over 7 lifetimes. That's fine. But, you've got to have that kind of sense of direction and certainty about where you're going. So that's always interesting. And then there's kind of different things. Like I like to take very often the core mood of a novel, not necessarily the core plot, but the notion, the voice of a thing that I'm writing will be summed up by something that I write quite early on. And I like to make sure I've got a print out of that and I tack it up somewhere I can see it. So that when I think to myself, oh, geez, I don't know if I can write this. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what this is supposed to feel like. This whole scene feels wrong. Where am I going? What's happening? And by the way, that's like once a day. I can look at that thing and go, okay, here is my pole star, here is my compass, right? This tells me the direction I'm going. Everything I need to know about the story is in that 4-inch paragraph. If it isn't consonant with that, it's the wrong book.
That's great. Well, what novels or nonfiction books have you read recently that you enjoyed?
I am a terrible human being right now because I have very little time to read. It's interesting. I don't know if you had this experience, but I had this notion at the beginning of the pandemic that I would catch up on my reading. I'm not sure I've ever been busier. And I'm kind of out of the habit. I'm trying to learn Irish. So what have I been reading? So I have, by my bed, I have Sarah Gailey's The Echo Wife, which I literally just dipped into and kind of like, they are amazing. It's a great book. What else have I got going on? I have Carlo Rovelli's book. There are places in the world where kindness is more important than rules or something. I can't remember. Kindness is more important than truth. I'm not sure.
Right.
So that's nonfiction. He's fascinating as a writer. I mean, he writes beautifully about incredibly difficult ideas in physics, and then he writes about Virgil, and you're just kind of, okay, good. You can do those too. That's great. I think he's really interesting. And then I was reading a book called Tehran Noir, which is a collection of noir stories, as you might imagine, set in Tehran. But I'm constantly, I just agglomerate books that I mean to read. So like I'm sitting at my desk. What have I got here? Of course, I'm surrounded by German editions of the first Jack Price novel. But if I wander kind of slightly further, there is a stack of books. There's a book on British boffins in the Second World War, deception operations. There's another one on Johann Sebastian Bach. There's somewhere in my room there is always a copy of Tan Tuan Eng's Garden of Evening Mists because I cannot resist that book. There's a stack of Octavia Butlers over there. I mean, everything. I'm constantly reading or constantly torturing myself with the idea that I ought to be reading something.
That's great. Well, where can people find you online if they want to learn more about you and your novels?
Where can you find me? Well, okay. Sporadically these days, you can find me on Twitter. I find social media increasingly difficult, but I am still on Twitter because I like some kind of connection with the wider world. Otherwise, let's see. I mean, I just started an Instagram account for my dog because she is extremely existential. She has a very worried look, which I take to be a kind of French existentialist horror about the universe. So there is a Dog versus Void Instagram account. So you can also find me there. But I mean, so I have a website, nickharkaway.com, which I'm shamefully lousy at updating. But there is a web form there for getting in touch with me as well. But in general, I'm just around. I'm not that hard to find.
Right. Well, again, we've been speaking with Nick Harkaway, author of 7 Demons, a novel that is being published under the pseudonym Aidan Truen. The book is on sale now, so go buy a copy. And Nick, thanks for doing this interview.
Thank you.
That was great. Now, stay tuned for a brief excerpt from the audiobook of the novel 7 Demons, available wherever audiobooks are sold.
Doc, who is my not-girlfriend and a global science felon, has a dog. The dog is called Tycho, and looking at Tycho, you would not think he was named for the guy who lost the middle part of his nose in a duel with swords. Tycho is a Saluki, and that is a tall, skinny, expensive dog, like if Gautier styled a greyhound for Miley Cyrus. Looking at Tycho, you would assume he was gentle and shy, and that is true insofar as it is mostly true and things that are mostly true are not true at all. Tycho is gentle and shy, but he is also a dog, and he will therefore attempt fornication with anything at all. The animal has no discretion and no sense of boundaries. Beneath the elegant exterior of a dog bred for generations by emirs and sheikhs, there lurks the heart of a dissolute sex pest, and despite what is undeniable, that Tycho is a sight hound and can see the hairs on a gnat's ass at 100 paces, it is clear that love, or at least savage and inappropriate lust, is blind. If he thinks an object is even moderately suited to receiving his organ, he will absolutely positively fuck it until one or the other of them is incapable. I have seen Tycho initiate coitus with a salt-baked sea bass, and that will be in my head forever. Forever. It is therefore something of a surprise that Tycho recently refused his affections to the lady dog belonging to a rich old Dutch party called Mrs. Van der Zee. But that is what he did, and there is no accounting for taste. Looking at Mrs. Van der Zee's dog, I would have said there was nothing to object to. Certainly Marta, this being the name of the lady dog, is a more obvious friend with benefits than 2 kilos of Michelin-starred fish on a bed of shaved black radish. But I am not judgy. Tycho and Marta did not make it, and that is that, but it is not that for Mrs. Van der Zee. Mrs. Van der Zee takes a dim view. She sees the absence of dog fornication as a slight upon Marta, and any slight upon Marta is a slight upon Mrs. Van der Zee, and one does not slight Mrs. Van der Zee. As a result of the non-fucking by Tycho of Marta, there had to be an owner-to-owner meeting in a truth and reconciliation mode, at which I was present purely as mediator, and it was not a good meeting at all. Mrs. Van der Zee lives in a big place by the sea, and it has gardens and tennis courts, and 2 heated pools and thousands of deluxe ultra-premium rare tulips. In fact, the whole place smells of sickly tulip stink, because Mrs. Van der Zee chooses to wear a customised perfume made by a guy named Jort. Jort is present at this exciting gathering in a sort of Roman short shorts playsuit. He is from Den Haag and has no body hair whatsoever, and I'm fairly sure Mrs. Van der Zee keeps him as some sort of quasi-sexual pet. I do not want to know what she does with him, and I do not think Jort wishes to talk about it. He works with both ancient wisdom and sophisticated modern techniques to create a unique signature scent experience using whatever you give him, which in this case, of course, is ultra-premium deluxe rare tulips. I am not a perfume guy, but when I was the cardinal of coffee, I developed a sensitive nose, because if you cannot tell when someone is trying to sell you basic sawdust Arabica for Hacienda La Esmeralda, you will get fucked in the civet hole. And this perfume smelled like someone had done that with violet to a perfectly innocent vetiver and then shaken the whole thing with turpentine. It is dis-fucking-gusting, and it is all over everything in the house. And when she shakes your hand, it goes on you like she's a plague vector, and it will not come off your clothes. So I may not have been entirely at the top of my game during this encounter, and it did not go ideally well. Over the salad course, by way of peacemaking, Doc ventured the opinion that the absence of sex between the canine companions may be owed to the fact that their antibodies were not sufficiently complementary, which seems like a good no-fault explanation to me. But Mrs. Van der Zee recorded, around a mouthful of Lollo Rosso, the alternative view that Tycho is a hate-filled canine communist. Doc said he was not hate-filled, nor indeed did he, being a dog, possess the necessary cognitive architecture to form political opinions of this kind, and Mrs. Van der Zee audibly concluded that Doc was one of those. When Doc requested clarification of what sort of those this might be, I was unable to prevent Mrs. Van der Zee from explaining that Doc, as evidenced by her lack of belief in dog politics, was a doino, or dog owner in name only, or she would know that our furry friends understand more than we think. Doc noted that she could arrange for Mrs. Van der Zee and her damn dog both to get a virulent and fast-progressing hemorrhagic fever. And I said shush, because that is a thing that Doc has done in her life, an ixnay on the Loing Bay Aye Overkay, and Doc said I should tixay, tit-a, put-a, I-may, sassay, and it was at this tense moment that Tycho chose to initiate vigorous and vocal sex with a Semper Augustus. A Semper Augustus is a kind of tulip whose petals look like marbled steak and which costs $10,000 a bulb. Also, when a Saluki fucks one, it makes a noise like cleaning a window with a squeegee.
Susan, it's so great to finally be able to get together again.
Oh, it sure is. And I really appreciate you picking up the bill.
I'm happy to. I've got the extra cash. Since we've all been driving so much more again, I've been using Get Upside, the free gas app that pays you cash back for every gallon of gas you buy.
Wait a minute. Are you saying you actually get paid cash when you buy gas with the Get Upside app?
Yes, up to 25 cents a gallon. Cash back every time I buy gas.
Does that actually add up to anything?
Some months I make $200 to $300.
Wow, that's serious extra cash. I'm downloading the free Get Upside app now.
Download the free Get Upside app now in the App Store or Google Play to save up to 25 cents a gallon when you buy gas. Use promo code PHIL for a 25 cents a gallon bonus on your first tank. That's up to 50 cents a gallon on your next fill-up. You can cash out anytime to PayPal or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code PHIL for a 25 cents a gallon bonus on your first tank. That's code PHIL.